Alright, the purpose of this video is to go over the comprehensive review of literature to help you prepare for your first assignment. Just to review in terms of the steps of the research process, the research process starts with selecting a problem, which you all should have done at this point. The problem should be predominantly written in, just a couple of words in the 30 or so words to best describe what it is you plan on doing. Where we fall then is we move over to this review of literature. The purpose of the review of literature is to really show that you fully understand your topic from all angles and organization, that you can speak about it cogently, and that you can use that information to then help you design a study which you'll be conducting for your thesis or dissertation or research project. But if you don't use the review of literature and information prior, or information that's been done already, the content that goes into designing your study is going to be flawed. If we have a flawed study design, it's going to we're going to have problems with collecting data. If we have problems collecting data, anything that comes out of the data will be poor, and therefore the analysis will be bad. And when you go to report the findings, you're not really going to have answered your problem in the first place. So the review of literature is really the underlying foundation to doing a solid research project. So when I say ROL, what I'm referring to as a review of literature, what does a review of literature include? It includes an introduction, which is usually about 2 to 3 pages, 3 to 5 content sections, 3 to 5 sections, usually 2 to 4 content sections and a measurement section. We'll talk about those. A summary of research literature. Sometimes I just see this called summary, sometimes it's called summary of research, sometimes it's called summary of literature, and then finally the bibliography. The introduction is, like I said, approximately 2 to 3 pages long, where you're going to introduce the topic generally. What you want to do is really think about throughout this whole paper is considering a funnel. Start very, very general, introducing the general nature of your topic, and by the end of your review of lit, you should have a topic sentence that leads into a listing of the sections or section headers that you will be addressing. So some sort of topic section or topic sentence will be, the purpose of this review of lit would be to examine the effects of A on B. And then you're going to have, followed up by that, the review of literature has been divided into the following sections for the reader, and then you want to list whatever your names of your other sections in this paper verbatim. I know this sounds a little silly, but this is a very, very, very important sentence, and it has to be in all reviews of lit, so don't forget this part. The other part students tend to forget in the introduction is that even though it is an introduction and it is going to have general information at the higher part of the funnel, it does have to include in-text citations. And make sure that you recognize the difference between common knowledge and facts that you might cite. In general, there is very little information that you don't have to cite in a review of literature. The purpose here is to show that you have read other articles and you can talk cogently and smart and succinctly on those other articles, so you have to cite them. So even though you want to say you just know this information, you got it from somewhere. In general, err on the side of citing and don't just assume that the information is something that's considered common knowledge. Alright. Next, we're going to have your content sections. These are sections where you describe the literature and the articles that you've read. It can include information on allied literature and critical literature, which I'll define in a little bit or in a few slides. They usually differ based on the way that people organize their sections, differ based on the type of research design and the level of research project. Dissertations often have an extra section or two than a thesis or a research project. So it sort of differs on that, but regardless, what will be found in here is, again, you're going to continue to work on the funnel process. So while you already have one funnel at the introduction, you're going to have each one of these content sections should be its own funnel, where ultimately they are also all acting as a very big funnel, where you should start most general at the top in your introduction and get most specific to your topic in the third content section. In terms of just knowing some very basics, a section by definition has to be a minimum of 2 paragraphs. Typically, we're looking at 6 to 8 pages. You may subdivide your sections, especially this is more common in dissertations where you have a 15-page or so section. However, you can't subdivide your section into subsections unless you have 2 or more subsections. As you start to identify what your content section should be, I strongly encourage you to talk to your chair or content advisor so that you can appropriately plan. As the research professor, I can give you some guidelines and suggestions about how to go, but I am in no way an expert on anybody's topic. So I can only, at best, give you some general supervision. I encourage you to go back to your content advisors. Now, the types of general sections we see, some early sections that tend to get covered is a historical or a general section. Might be history of coaching standards in the United States. From a scientific standpoint, I've seen anatomy of the knee for somebody who is doing a ACL study. I have seen in strength and conditioning things on how to the power clean, squat, in psychology, sports psychology, teaching administration, anything where we're not talking about physiology, you should be looking at having a theoretical section to help you develop your hypothesis as well as conduct your analysis. So it might be the theory of moral disengagement, it could be social cognitive theory, it could be social identity theory, could be the theory of self-determination, which is motivational theories. Whatever it is, that's the very typical first section or general section for anybody not in physiology. In physiology, it's going to be the sciences, the background. Then as you move down the funnel, you're going to do research on allied research studies. This is going to be articles that are going to be not exactly on your topic, but they do provide some justification or information on your topic. And then your final section is usually something that's on your critical literature. This is a section that provides the articles that most closely aligns with your topic and best justifies the study you plan on conducting. After you do your content sections, your last quote-unquote content section is a measurement section. Depending on what type of study you're going to do, you're either going to do a regular measurement section, a questionnaire development section, or a qualitative research section. Most people do a measurement section. This is where you are going to define what your measurement is, what the protocol is, how that measurement was developed, its reliability, and its evidence of reliability and validity. Questionnaire development, this is not done very often at the thesis level or even at the dissertation level. It's a very high-level project, so unless you know you're doing scale development, you're not going to do this. Sometimes it's done from a content validity standpoint in the research project level, but I shouldn't see too many people in this class do it. The other more common one is if you're going to do a qualitative approach, you are going to use a qualitative research section, and this is where you're going to identify how the analysis for your certain type of qualitative research lends itself to identifying internal validity. So this is where you'll talk about developing trustworthiness and triangulation and constant comparison, or if you're doing grounded method or grounded theory, or you can talk about phenomenology, or in this case, ecological model, whole bunch of different options depending on what type of qualitative research you're going to do. When you write a section, I want you to again keep this funnel metaphor. I'm going to refer to it about 50 times all semester. You're going to start up top with a very brief introduction. That's usually one paragraph that you're going to tell me what's going to be in the section. Then as you move down the funnel, the bulk of it is talking about your sources and your content. Then you should have a brief one paragraph summarizing the section, and the final is a sentence at the end of that summary section that transitions me to the next section. So every single content section, which includes your measurement section, should have that. Then your last section is called the Summary Research Literature section. It is its own section, but it's not considered a content. It's approximately 3 to 5 pages, and that's if you're using Courier New. If you use Times New Roman or Arial, it's going to be a little shorter. Here's where you're going to summarize every prior section, so all of your content sections, including your measurement section, in 1 to 2 paragraphs each. So each section should have its own 1 to 2 paragraphs. These summary paragraphs must include in-text citations, and since it is a summary, it shouldn't include any new citations. It should only recite our articles that you've already cited. So it should be just reiterating material you've already said. Then the last 1 to 2 paragraphs is going to be kind of a general conclusion paragraph that says, based on all the information you've told me, what future researchers should consider doing. And basically, when you're referring to future researchers, you're referring to yourself and what you plan on doing for your thesis, dissertation, or independent study or research project. So that should be the last sentence or two, is future researchers should consider doing X, and with a brief 1-sentence general description of your study. The final part of this assignment is to hand in a bibliography. Your bibliography has to include all the references that you cited in your bibliography. There should, technically, there should not be sources that you did not cite in your bibliography at the end of the semester. However, because this is early and it's your first draft, you can include sources that you have yet to write about, but you do plan on including later. The header for the paper is bibliography, obviously no quotation marks. It should be in all caps, it is not bolded, and it is centered in the paper. So just as a reminder, as you're working through your paper and organizing, you're going to work from broad. So in this case, our broad is our attitude theory, our theory section. Then we go into our allied lit section, which is very general attitude theory and sports. And then we'll move towards more specific critical lit, and then finally finish up with our measurement section. Now, before I move on to allied versus critical lit, I just want to point out in the slides on this PowerPoint that are available up on Moodle, I have a series of examples for sections and subsections of some theses and independent studies. So I encourage you to flip through the entire PowerPoint slideshow that I'm not doing all of it in the video. Alright, so what is allied versus critical lit? Allied lit is, like I said, it's sources that are not directly on your topic but provide information. To give you an example, in my master's thesis, I was looking at looking at the relationship between homophobia and team cohesion in sport. So my allied literature I was looking at issues in terms of homophobia and unit cohesion in the military. So that was a related topic, but not exactly right on it. I was looking at other things that decrease cohesion, so things that had to do with role clarity and conformity and so on, as well as other things that improve or decrease, that decrease homophobia. So those would have all been articles on critical or allied literature. Then the articles that actually looked at team cohesion or the extent to which teams got along and homophobia in sport, those are what I spent time with my critical literature. Now, in terms of how you write about that, when you write about allied literature, you're not going to necessarily spend a ton of time on allied literature. You're going to rank it and prioritize it a little bit lower. So you might find times where you're going to just generally cite sources in a sentence or two. You might only write a paragraph about a research study for allied lit. But in comparison, you might take 2 to 3, I don't want to say 2 to 3 pages, but maybe 2 pages to talk about a really important critical study. You might spend 2 to 3 paragraphs on some pretty close critical studies. So critical lit, you're going to prioritize higher, and therefore you're going to write more about it. Allied lit, rank it in order of how close it is, and the higher it is on the funnel, meaning the broader, spend less time on it. Again, remember at the end of each of these sections, you're going to have to include some form of summary and transition. So just to encourage you, make sure at the end of each of your content sections include a summary that would include what do we know, make sure to cite your sources, And then here's where you can kind of include information about your own critique, what still needs to be investigated, what gaps are left over, what did they maybe do wrong, or what measurement or design issues still need to be addressed. That can be potentially a transition to the next section, but don't forget to transition to the next section. In terms of APA, other than that first part of your paper that should say, your first part of your paper actually shouldn't look like this, and I'll write that on the slide, but all of your content section, or all of your sections should have bold center headering. Then you're going to have any sort of introductions. If you do subdivide, those are called level 2 headers. They're going to be bold side heads, and then you'll talk about it. Most of you shouldn't get down to this level. For the most part, your 5 content sections should be bold heads. Now, I'm just going to add quick here. The way that your paper should start off, though, should look a little bit different, where it's going to say, hold on, my stylus timed out on me. Your paper is going to say centered appendix B, and then double space, and then review of literature, and that should be review of literature is all in caps. Notice appendix B is not, and none of this is in bold. And that's going to be the first 2 lines. You do not put the title of your paper on your review of lit. So as you're finishing up your review of lit, please use your resources. I will always be available to you, but other resources that you can use are the APA manual. That'll help you with headers. That will help you with citation formats. We will talk about citing in class. There is a thesis and dissertation manual available to you. It's on Moodle right now for your review. Review of literature, read one in your area. Now, published ones are going to be in a little bit of a different format, but the general concept on how to write about studies should be the same. And then finally, there are plenty of Springfield College theses or dissertations in the library that you can check out. Anything before 2012 is going to be an APA 5th edition, so the formatting might be off, and also there's no guarantee that any student has 100% perfect formatting, but they can certainly be helpful to help in terms of organization as you go through. In terms of where does this fit, everything that's on this slide is what you're going to accomplish over the course of this summer, over the course of this semester. What you're really doing right now is we're working from the end, doing Appendix B, the review of literature, and then you'll hand in the bibliography. We'll work our way back, where your next assignments will be Appendix A and then journal article, and then we'll work our way back once you understand, again, in order to design your research that's going to be presented in that method section and that research design section, we need to have a good grounding in the lit. So that's what we're going to spend the first half of the semester on, is working on your review of lit. Alright, well that takes us to the end of the lecture. If you have any questions, let me know. Feel free to email me, and I hope you found this helpful. Thank you very much.